There's a certain kind of person who moves through the world without treating their appearance like something that needs constant management. And if you've ever noticed them, they tend to confuse people more than they should. While everyone else is fine-tuning outfits, angles, skincare routines, gym splits, and personal brands, these people seem almost untouched by the weight of it all. They leave the house without checking the mirror twice, wear the same jacket for years, ignore trends completely, and somehow remain unbothered by how they're perceived. And that raises a quiet but uncomfortable question in a culture obsessed with visibility. What's going on psychologically when someone genuinely doesn't care about how they look? Because, contrary to popular belief, this isn't laziness, depression, or low self-respect by default. In many cases, it's the result of a very specific internal wiring. To understand it, you have to start with how most people experience their appearance. For the average person, their looks act like a social dashboard, constantly feeding them signals about status, safety, belonging, and approval. Clothes aren't just clothes, they're information. Hair isn't just hair, it's messaging. And for most people, this system runs quietly in the background, shaping behavior without conscious effort. But for some individuals, that dashboard is turned way down, or in some cases almost completely off. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a low appearance-based self-schema. In simple terms, it means physical appearance isn't a core ingredient in how they define themselves. Their identity isn't anchored to how they look, so changes in appearance don't register as meaningful changes to who they are. When they look in the mirror, they see a body, not a statement. And that alone already separates them from the majority. What's interesting is that many of these people aren't unaware of social standards. They know what looks good. They understand fashion, grooming, attractiveness. They just don't experience it as personally relevant. It doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel tied to survival or self-worth. And that's where things get misunderstood. From the outside, it can look like indifference or neglect, but internally, it's often a sign of something psychologists call internalized self-validation. These individuals learned, early or gradually, that their value comes from what they think, create, notice, or understand, not from how they're perceived visually. Their sense of self lives in their inner narrative, not on the surface. And once that internal validation system is strong enough, external feedback about looks starts to feel optional instead of necessary. Another layer of this psychology has to do with attention economy fatigue. We live in a world where appearance has been turned into a full-time performance. Cameras everywhere. Social media profiles acting like public resumes. Constant comparison, constant exposure. Some people respond to this by leaning in harder, optimizing everything. Others respond by quietly opting out. For them, not caring about their looks is a form of cognitive conservation. They're protecting mental energy. Every decision you don't make about clothes, grooming, or presentation is a decision you don't have to carry. And over time, this becomes a lifestyle. They simplify not because they can't compete, but because they don't want to. There's also a strong connection to something called self-concept clarity. People who don't care much about their appearance often have a very stable sense of who they are internally. They're less reactive to external evaluation because their identity doesn't shift easily. Compliments don't inflate them much. Criticism doesn't collapse them either. When appearance isn't tied to self-worth, it loses its emotional leverage. And that emotional neutrality is powerful. It allows them to walk into rooms without scanning for approval. They don't dress to be seen, they dress to function. And that functional orientation shows up everywhere in their lives. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Not caring about looks can also be a subtle rejection of social power games. Appearance is currency. It always has been. It influences how people listen to you, trust you, treat you, and some people, consciously or unconsciously, refuse to participate in that system. They don't want to trade aesthetics for influence. They'd rather be underestimated than constantly evaluated. Psychologically, this often aligns with low dominance motivation. These individuals aren't trying to climb visible hierarchies. They're not competing for attention, admiration, or status through appearance. Their goals tend to be quieter, more internal, more long-term. And because of that, the incentives that drive most people simply don't land the same way. There's also a fascinating overlap with time perception. People who obsess over their looks are often deeply present focused or socially future focused, thinking about how they'll be seen in the next interaction, the next post, the next impression. People who don't care about their appearance often operate on a different timeline. Their attention is pointed inward or forward in abstract ways, ideas, systems, long arcs of meaning. When your mind is occupied with thought instead of display, appearance becomes background noise. You don't ignore it out of rebellion. You forget about it because your attention is elsewhere. And attention is everything in psychology. Where your attention goes, your identity follows. Another misunderstood piece of this puzzle is comfort with invisibility. For many people, being unseen feels threatening. It triggers anxiety, irrelevance, even panic. But for some individuals, invisibility feels safe. It feels neutral. It feels like freedom. When you don't care about your looks, you're less likely to feel watched, judged, or ranked. You can move through the world without performing. That's deeply appealing to certain personality types, especially those high in introspection or abstract thinking. They experience the world internally first, externally second. Appearance in that hierarchy just doesn't rank very high. Of course, not all cases are healthy. Sometimes indifference toward appearance can come from disengagement, burnout, or a protective numbness. When life has demanded too much, caring about how you look can feel trivial or exhausting. But the key difference lies in emotional tone. Healthy indifference feels calm. Unhealthy neglect feels heavy. One is spacious, the other is constricted. One comes from choice, the other from depletion. And outsiders often fail to tell the difference because they're only looking at the surface. What's particularly interesting is how these people react to compliments. When you praise their appearance, it often lands awkwardly, not because they dislike compliments, but because it doesn't connect to anything central inside them. It's like complimenting someone on the color of a wall they didn't choose. There's no emotional hook. Praise that targets their thinking, values, or insight, on the other hand, hits much deeper. That's where their identity actually lives. And here's the paradox. In a world obsessed with looking unique, people who don't care about their looks often end up standing out the most. There's something disarming about someone who isn't trying. It signals psychological independence. It suggests they're not seeking permission to exist. And humans are extremely sensitive to that signal, even if they can't articulate it. We're wired to notice who is performing and who isn't. And non-performance carries a strange kind of authority. Not loud authority, quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Ultimately, the psychology of people who don't care about their looks isn't about apathy, it's about priority. It's about where identity is anchored, it's about whether self-worth is negotiated externally or generated internally. And in a culture that constantly tells you that how you look is who you are, choosing not to care can be one of the most psychologically revealing choices a person can make. Not because it's right or wrong, but because it exposes a deeper question most people never stop to ask. What part of me actually needs to be seen, and what part of me doesn't? And once you answer that honestly, appearance either becomes a tool, or it fades into the background. For some people, it was never the point to begin with.